March 21st, 1918, Villers-Bretonneux. The half-timbered house is already collapsing behind him, flames tearing through the second floor. A young American soldier carries a woman in his arms, her dark headscarf slipping, face pale with shock. She's screaming something in Russian-accented English he can't understand through the artillery thunder. 89 casualties in this sector alone, shells hitting every 30 seconds. He never sees her face clearly, just smoke, blood, desperation. A silver pocket watch falls from her coat into the mud as he hands her to the medics, glass shattering, hands freezing at 4:47. 14 years later, that same soldier stands on stage accepting an Academy Award for Best Actor. The woman? Duchess Maria Pavlovna, Romanov cousin, fleeing with $2.3 million in stolen imperial jewels and Catherine the Great's personal timepiece. He never knew her name. Stalin wanted them both dead. The soldier's name was James Aldrich, 23 years old, enlisted 6 months earlier with the American Expeditionary Forces, 3rd Division. Operation Michael, the German spring offensive, hit with 6,000 guns firing 21,000 shells per minute. Historical records confirm it was the largest artillery barrage in human history up to that point. Aldrich spent that morning pulling wounded men from collapsed buildings, his uniform soaked in blood that wasn't his. One house was still standing when he heard the screaming. Russian-accented English, desperate. He kicked through the door, found her pinned under a beam. Delirious, bleeding from her temple, clutching an empty leather satchel like it was her child. He dragged her out as the ceiling came down, handed her off to the medics, never asked her name. There were a dozen more buildings to clear. The watch stayed in the mud for 6 hours before a French medic picked it up, pocketed it, figured it was worthless. The woman whispered, "They'll come for it," as Aldrich walked away. He didn't understand Russian. 2 worlds diverged from that rescue. Aldrich survived the Western Front, returned to Montana in 1919, and drifted to Los Angeles looking for work. By 1921, he was doing stunt work. By 1925, his face was recognizable. By 1928, he was making $500,000 a year and living in a Bel Air mansion with a pool shaped like a crescent moon. The war became a blur of mud and noise. He couldn't remember individual rescues, just the weight of bodies and the smell of cordite. Meanwhile, the woman woke up in an Allied field hospital outside Amiens. Hospital records listed her as Marie Dubois, a fake French identity she'd been using since fleeing Russia in 1917. Her real name was Maria Pavlovna, 3rd cousin to Tsar Nicholas II. The Bolsheviks had executed her parents in a cellar in Yekaterinburg. She escaped with one thing: a coat lined with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds sewn into the fabric, authenticated by a single object, Catherine the Great's personal pocket watch, engraved with the imperial seal. When the house collapsed during Aldrich's rescue, the coat tore. The jewels scattered in the rubble. The watch fell and was lost. Without the watch, the jewels couldn't be verified or sold. She was carrying $2.3 million in imperial treasure, and she had no way to prove it. The coat in her hospital bed showed torn lining, empty seams. She stared at it for 3 days, then assumed a new identity and vanished into Paris. Aldrich never thought about her again. The rescue was one of dozens. Pull someone out, move to the next building, survive until morning. By 1932, his face was on billboards across America. He had a 3-picture deal with MGM, a chauffeur, and a penthouse suite he rarely used because he preferred his ranch outside Pasadena. The watch, meanwhile, traveled. The French medic sold it to an antique dealer in Lyon for 20 francs. The dealer recognized the craftsmanship, sold it to a London collector for £200. By 1928, it was sitting in a glass case in Mayfair, priced at $15,000. Duchess Maria, still using the name Marie Dubois, worked as a seamstress in the 9th arrondissement, hunted but hidden. White Russian exiles wanted the jewels to fund their counter-revolution. Bolshevik agents wanted her eliminated. She searched for the watch obsessively. It was the only proof the jewels existed, the only way to authenticate them if they were ever recovered. By late 1931, she'd tracked it to the London collector. By early 1932, it appeared at a Paris auction house. Estimated value, 40,000. She scraped together 3,000 francs, bid under a false name, and lost. An anonymous American buyer paid 65,000 and had it shipped to Los Angeles. She didn't know who bought it, but she knew where it was going. An army photographer had taken a picture during the rescue, buried in military archives, never published. It showed a young soldier carrying a woman through smoke. The faces were partially visible. Moscow, 1931. An NKVD archivist named Dmitry Volkov was reviewing Western Front intelligence when he found the photograph. American soldier, burning village, woman in his arms. Villers-Bretonneux, March 1918. He cross-referenced the woman's face with Romanov exile files. Positive match. Maria Pavlovna, presumed dead. Stalin's directive was immediate. Recover imperial treasure, eliminate all witnesses. The problem was the soldier. Face partially visible, but the photo quality was poor. If Maria Pavlovna was alive, she could identify him. If the jewels still existed, someone would come looking. Volkov was sent to Paris to find the Duchess. The story goes he spent 3 months tracking her movements through seamstress guilds and Russian émigré networks. By spring 1932, he had her address. He didn't approach her. He watched. When she bid at the auction for the watch, he was in the back row. When she lost, he followed the buyer's payment trail. Hollywood fixer, Los Angeles. Client list included the biggest names and pictures. Volkov reported back to Moscow. The Americans had the watch. Someone in Hollywood knew about the Romanov connection. And Maria Pavlovna was searching for the same soldier Volkov needed to find, not to expose him, but to thank him. She'd been searching for 15 years. Los Angeles, 1932. James Aldrich's fixer was a man named Charlie Roth. 30 years in the business, knew everyone, fixed everything. When the Paris auction house contacted him about a unique piece of American military history, Roth bought it sight unseen. $65,000 was nothing for a client pulling $500,000 a year. He had the watch shipped, cleaned, and presented it to Aldrich over lunch at the Brown Derby. "War memorabilia from your regiment," Roth said. Aldrich turned it over in his hands. Beautiful craftsmanship. Russian inscription he couldn't read. He thanked Roth, took it home, displayed it on his desk in the study. Didn't think about it again. His days were 14-hour shoots, premieres, interviews, script meetings. The watch sat there gathering dust, hands frozen at 4:47, while 3 separate forces converged on Los Angeles. Maria Pavlovna arrived in September, traveling under a Belgian passport, carrying the army photograph. She'd spent 5 years tracking the soldier's face, matching it against newsreels and publicity photos. When she saw Aldrich's face in a movie magazine, she was certain. Soviet agent Volkov landed 2 weeks later, following her movements, and the FBI was already watching both of them. Bureau cryptographers had intercepted Soviet cables mentioning Romanov Recovery Operation, Los Angeles sector. 3 hunters circling the same prey. Aldrich had no idea. He was preparing for his Oscar campaign, his performance in Shadow Valley generating serious buzz for the first time in his career. "Real wealth is what people don't see," he'd told a reporter once. That line would haunt everyone who came after. Maria Pavlovna rented a room in a boarding house on Sunset Boulevard, with a view of Aldrich's mansion 3 blocks away. She spent 2 weeks watching through binoculars. Morning coffee on the terrace, chauffeur picking him up at 9, return around 7. She saw the watch on his desk through the study window, ornate, silver, unmistakable even at this distance. Her hands shook. 15 years searching, and there it was, displayed like a trophy. She tried approaching him at a premiere in October, but security turned her away. She left a handwritten note with his assistant. "You saved me in France, 1918. I must speak with you." The assistant added it to a stack of fan mail that went unanswered. Aldrich received dozens of letters weekly from people claiming he'd saved their lives, changed their lives, inspired their lives. One more desperate woman didn't register. The same week, Volkov broke into Aldrich's house while the actor was at the studio. Simple lockpick, 15 minutes inside. He photographed the watch from multiple angles, checked for hidden compartments, found nothing. The watch was exactly what it appeared to be. Catherine the Great's timepiece, stolen during the revolution, lost during the war. Volkov's orders were clear: recover the watch, locate the jewels, eliminate anyone who knew. But the jewels weren't here, just the watch, which meant Maria Pavlovna still knew where they were, or at least where to look. FBI agent Robert Kellerman was parked across the street when Volkov exited through the back door. Kellerman had been tailing the Soviet for 3 days, didn't know why, just had orders from Washington. Something about imperial treasure and Hollywood. He radioed it in. By midnight, the Bureau had cross-referenced Aldrich's army records. The rescue report was in the file. Everything started clicking into place. 3 forces converging. November 1932, Oscar season heating up. Aldrich's name appearing on every prediction list. He was completely unaware of the surveillance, the break-in, the woman watching from Sunset Boulevard. His routine continued. Studio, premieres, interviews, home. Maria Pavlovna grew desperate. She tried mailing another letter, this one with the army photograph enclosed. Aldrich's assistant threw it away. Too many stalkers, too many fakes. The photograph landed in a trash can outside his office. 1 hour later, it was retrieved by an FBI agent who'd been monitoring Aldrich's mail. Kellerman looked at the photo, looked at the woman's handwriting, made a decision. He approached her at her boarding house that night, told her the Bureau knew everything: the Romanov jewels, the Soviet surveillance, the watch in Aldrich's study. Told her she had 2 options: cooperate with the FBI or get deported as a foreign intelligence risk. She chose cooperation. Told Kellerman the whole story. The jewels were still buried in Villers-Bretonneux, France, in the rubble of the house where Aldrich pulled her out. The watch was the authentication. Without it, the jewels were just rocks. With it, they were imperial treasure worth $2.3 million. Kellerman asked why she needed Aldrich. She said he was the only person who knew the exact house, the exact location. Army records listed the sector, but not the specific building. Aldrich's memory was the map. Kellerman filed an emergency report to Hoover. By December, the plan was set. Use Aldrich to recover the jewels. Use the jewels as bait to capture Volkov. Prevent Soviet acquisition of imperial assets. They just needed Aldrich to remember one rescue from 14 years ago. One woman he never saw clearly. One house in a village full of burning buildings. The watch was the key. If you're hooked now, wait till you hear what happens next. February 1933, 1 week before the Academy Awards. Maria Pavlovna walked onto the MGM lot with an FBI escort and demanded to see James Aldrich. Security almost threw her out until Agent Kellerman flashed his badge. They brought Aldrich out of a rehearsal, sat him down in a conference room, and showed him the army photograph. He stared at it for a full minute. The smoke, the burning village, the woman in his arms. He remembered the chaos, but not her face. She stood up, spoke for the first time since entering the room. Villers-Bretonneux, March 21st, 1918. You pulled me from a collapsing house and saved my life. Her accent hadn't faded. Aldrich looked at her, looked at the photo, nodded slowly. I remember the day. I don't remember you specifically. She told him everything. Duchess Maria Pavlovna, cousin to the Tsar, fled Russia with imperial treasures sewn into her coat. The house collapsed during the rescue, jewels scattered in the rubble, watch lost in the mud. She'd been searching for him for 15 years, not for fame, not for revenge, just to recover what was hers. Aldrich asked the obvious question, why now? Kellerman answered, because Stalin wants her dead, and the Soviets think you're a witness. He showed Aldrich surveillance photos of Volkov outside his mansion, transcripts of intercepted cables, NKVD orders to eliminate all connections to Romanov's survival. Aldrich leaned back in his chair, processing. You're telling me I'm a target because I pulled someone out of a burning building 14 years ago? Kellerman nodded. And the only way to end this is to help her recover the jewels and hand them over to the Bureau as evidence. Maria Pavlovna corrected him. Half the jewels are mine. The other half can be evidence. Aldrich looked at the watch sitting on the conference table. Catherine the Great's timepiece, hands frozen at 4:47. He'd been using it as a paperweight. He agreed to the plan. 1 trip to France, 1 excavation. Then this would be over. The next 48 hours were a carefully orchestrated deception. Aldrich continued his Oscar campaign, premieres, interviews, photo shoots, while FBI agents arranged private transport to France. Maria Pavlovna stayed in a bureau safe house, guarded 24 hours. Volkov continued his surveillance, unaware the FBI had him tagged. 2 days before the Academy Awards, Kellerman approached Aldrich with new intelligence. Volkov had orders to strike during the ceremony, too public to kill, but perfect for kidnapping. Stalin wanted Aldrich interrogated about the jewel's location before being disappeared. The plan shifted. Use the Oscars as theater. Let Volkov think he still had the element of surprise, then spring the trap. Aldrich would attend, give his speech if he won, then immediately fly to France with Maria and FBI escort. Volkov would follow. The jewels would be the bait. Meanwhile, Maria Pavlovna contacted someone she shouldn't have. White Russian exiles in New York, anti-Bolshevik hardliners who'd been hunting the imperial treasure for 16 years. She told them she'd found the watch, found the soldier, knew where the jewels were buried. She wanted backup in case the FBI betrayed her. The exiles agreed to send men to France. Kellerman didn't know about this second group, neither did Volkov. But everyone was headed to the same village, the same rubble, the same moment of truth. February 18th, 1933, Academy Award ceremony at the Ambassador Hotel. Cameras, champagne, Hollywood's entire aristocracy packed into one ballroom. Aldrich sat in the 4th row, tuxedo immaculate, hands steady. Maria Pavlovna watched from a balcony seat arranged by the FBI, flanked by 2 agents. Volkov sat in the press section, posing as a Soviet cultural correspondent, concealed pistol against his ribs. FBI agents were positioned at every exit, backstage, in the lobby. When Aldrich's name was called for Best Actor, the applause was genuine. He walked to the stage, accepted the Oscar, gave a 90-second speech about ordinary heroism in extraordinary times, a phrase Kellerman had written specifically to send a message. Aldrich thanked his director, his co-stars, his mother, never mentioned the war. The audience stood. Volkov clapped along with everyone else, already planning his next move. After the ceremony, Aldrich returned to his dressing room. The Oscar sat next to the silver watch on the table. Kellerman entered without knocking. Volkov's moving. We need to go now. They exited through a service entrance, climbed into an unmarked bureau car, drove straight to a private airfield in Burbank. Maria Pavlovna was already on the plane, a military transport arranged through State Department channels. By midnight, they were over the Atlantic. Volkov reached Aldrich's mansion 2 hours later, found it empty. He made 1 phone call to Moscow, received new orders, and booked the next available flight to Paris. The FBI had a mole. Volkov knew the entire plan. March 1933, Villers-Bretonneux, France. The village had been rebuilt after the war. Memorial plaques everywhere. 89 names carved in stone. Aldrich stood in the square with Maria Pavlovna, trying to remember which house it had been. 15 years of reconstruction had erased the landmarks. She described it from memory. Corner building, red shutters, 2 stories. He pointed to a spot near the memorial. There. That's where the medical tent was. I carried you about 40 yards. They walked northwest, found a rebuilt house on a corner, red shutters, different structure. The foundation was original. French authorities confirmed that most basements survived the war intact. They got permission to excavate. FBI agents and French police cordoned off the area. Shovels hit stone at 3 feet. Then fabric, rotted, barely holding together. Then something hard. Maria Pavlovna's hands shook as she pulled out the first stone. A ruby the size of a walnut. Catherine the Great's personal seal still faintly visible on the setting. The coat's lining had deteriorated, but the jewels were intact. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, authenticated by the imperial seal. They counted 237 stones. Conservative estimate, $2.3 million. Kellerman radioed Washington. The jewels were laid out on a table in the village mayor's office, the silver watch placed beside them as proof of providence. And that's when the shooting started. Volkov had arrived with 3 NKVD operatives, ambushing the convoy on the road back to Paris. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. FBI killed Volkov and 1 operative, wounded another. 2 agents took bullets, but survived. Maria Pavlovna and Aldrich stayed inside the mayor's office, hearing gunfire through the walls. When it ended, Kellerman walked in, covered in blood, none of it his, and said, "It's done." The aftermath was diplomatic chaos. Soviet Union protested the assassination of cultural journalists on French soil. State Department sealed all records, classified the incident for national security. Maria Pavlovna sold the jewels through a London auction house after FBI took their evidence samples and netted $1.9 million. She settled in Geneva under another new identity, bought a small villa, lived quietly until her death in 1962. Her Swiss bank account held $340,000 at the time. No heirs, the money went to the Russian Orthodox Church. Aldrich returned to Hollywood. FBI debriefed him for 3 days, made him sign a dozen non-disclosure agreements, then released him with a warning. The story stays buried or he'd face federal charges for obstruction. He kept the watch, never wound it, never moved the hands from 447, displayed it in a glass case in his private study, told visitors it was a war souvenir. His career continued, 3 more Oscars over the next decade, retirement in 1955. But people close to him said he changed after France, more careful, more aware of how close he'd come to dying for a rescue he barely remembered. The watch stayed with him until his death in 1958. The obituary listed his war service, his Hollywood legacy, his philanthropy. No mention of Romanov jewels or Soviet assassins. The watch was donated to the Smithsonian with deliberately vague provenance. Recovered from Western Front, World War I. Donor, James Aldrich Estate. The real story stayed classified until 1991, released after the Cold War ended and everyone involved was dead. The watch sits in a museum display case now, hands still frozen at 447. The inscription was finally translated for the public. Time stops for no crown. Researchers pieced together the connections, the rescue, the jewels, the Oscar night trap, the shootout in France. Some details remain disputed. FBI later claimed Maria Pavlovna was a Soviet double agent, that the jewels funded communist operations in Switzerland. Her bank records suggest otherwise, but the files are incomplete. What's certain? Aldrich pulled a woman from a burning house in 1918, saved her life without knowing who she was, and 15 years later, nearly died because of it. The watch became the thread connecting Imperial Russia to Hollywood to Cold War espionage. One object passed through a dozen hands, carrying the weight of murdered royalty and stolen fortunes. People who study this story, the historians, the conspiracy theorists, the auction house specialists, all focus on the jewels. They miss the real point. Aldrich didn't want his share, donated his half to the French War Memorial Fund, told Kellerman he'd already been paid enough. In saving her life, he saved imperial treasure and nearly lost his own for it. Some rescues echo for decades. Some watches stop, but the hunt never does.